Good morning. I am Daniel Brooks, and I am going to tell you a story. Not just any story. This is the story of how the most powerful people on this planet, presidents, billionaires, kings, and prime ministers, have been connected to one man. One man who trafficked young girls. One man who should have gone to prison for life. But he didn't. And the reason he didn't, that is the real story. This is part one. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Let's start from the beginning. Jeffrey Epstein, an American financier, a billionaire. On the surface, he looked like any other powerful man in New York. Private jets, mansions, parties with the richest people in the world. But behind closed doors, Jeffrey Epstein was running one of the biggest sex trafficking operations in the history of the United States. He was trafficking young girls, some as young as 13 years old, to the most powerful men on this planet. In 2008, Epstein was arrested. He was charged with soliciting prostitution from a minor. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Instead of facing life in prison, which is what the crime deserved, Epstein made a deal with prosecutors. He served only 13 months in a county jail with work release. That means he could leave jail every single day and come back at night. This deal was made by a man named Alex Acosta. Alex Acosta later became Donald Trump's own labor secretary. And when people asked Acosta why he made such a soft deal, he reportedly told Trump's transition team something that should send a chill down your spine. He said he was told to back off. He said Epstein belonged to intelligence. He said to leave it alone. So right from the start, right from the very beginning, there were questions, big questions, about who was protecting Jeffrey Epstein and why. Then in July 2019, Epstein was arrested again, this time on federal sex trafficking charges. This time, he was facing life in prison. No deals, no escape. 1 month later, on August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. The government called it suicide. But the files that were just released, they include Epstein's last note. And investigators say, it does not appear to be a suicide note. So was it really suicide? That is a question the American people have been asking for years, and the files that were just released, they don't give us a clear answer, but they give us something else, something even bigger. Now here's the question everyone is asking. The government had these files since 2019. Some of these files go back decades. So why are they releasing them now? In 2026? The answer is a law called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This law was passed by the United States Congress in November 2025, and it was signed by President Trump himself. This law forced the Department of Justice to release every single document related to the Epstein investigation. Every email, every photo, every flight log, everything. The deadline was December 19, 2025, but the Department of Justice missed that deadline. They said they needed more time to go through the files, and what they released in December, over 500 pages, were completely blacked out, completely hidden. And here's the shocking part. Social media users figured out how to unblock the hidden text. They just copied and pasted it into another application. And suddenly, information that the government was trying to hide was all over the internet. So the government was caught. They were caught trying to hide information. Then on January 30th, 2026, the Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of documents, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. They said this was the final release. They said they had met their legal obligation. But here is what they are not telling you. Congress identified over 6 million pages of documents. The DOJ only released 3.5 million. That means roughly half of the files are still hidden, still locked away. And the reason they gave? Child pornography, internal communications, attorney-client privilege. But many people in Congress, from both parties, do not believe that explanation. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie and Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, two men from opposite political parties, they came together on this. They demanded to see the unredacted files. They said Congress cannot properly assess what the Department of Justice did without seeing the complete record. And they are not done. This fight is far from over. Now, this is where this story gets really uncomfortable for a lot of very powerful people. The files that were released contain names, big names. Names that most people in this country know. Names that most people in this country trust. And here is what is important to understand. Just because a name appears in these files does not automatically mean that person committed a crime, but it does mean they had a connection to Jeffrey Epstein. And in this case, the connections are very, very deep. Let's talk about some of these names. Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. His name appears thousands of times in these documents. Trump has said for years that he kicked Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club decades ago and ended their friendship. And some of the documents do support that. A former Epstein employee testified that Trump never stayed at Epstein's home. But, and this is important, Trump himself signed the law that forced these files to be released. He claims the files clear him completely. He says they absolve him. Whether that is true, the American people will have to decide for themselves. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, Trump's biggest supporter. His name appears over 1,000 times in the files. Emails show that in 2012, Musk wrote to Epstein asking about visiting Epstein's private Caribbean island. He wrote asking what night would be the wildest party on the island. Now, Musk has publicly claimed that he refused Epstein's invitations. But these emails tell a different story. The emails show Musk was actively reaching out, not the other way around. Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, one of the biggest philanthropists in the world. The files contain a draft email, and it is disturbing. In this email, Epstein appears to have been blackmailing Gates. Epstein referenced requests to delete emails about Gates' personal life. He suggested Gates provide him with millions of dollars. Gates' foundation has called these allegations completely false, but the email exists. It is in the files. Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States. Photos show Clinton with Epstein. Flight logs show Clinton traveled on Epstein's private jet multiple times. Clinton has denied visiting Epstein's island and denied knowing about his crimes. The Clintons were summoned by Congress to testify. They refused. They called the subpoena legally invalid, and Congress voted to hold them in contempt. Both of them. Prince Andrew, the British royal, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. New photos have been released showing him in very compromising positions. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has suggested that Prince Andrew should testify before US Congress. Andrew has so far ignored that request entirely. Howard Lutnick, Trump's own Commerce Secretary. Documents show that Lutnick visited Epstein's Caribbean island with his family in 2012. This directly contradicts what Lutnick himself said in October 2025, when he called Epstein the greatest blackmailer ever and claimed he had cut ties with him years ago. And there are more names: Richard Branson, Larry Summers, Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, Google co-founder Sergey Brin, Casey Wasserman, Dr. Mehmet Oz, Kevin Warsh. The list goes on and on. This is not a small circle. This is a massive network of the most powerful people on earth. Now, I need to talk about something that mainstream media is very reluctant to discuss: the Israel connection. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. He is all over these files. Documents show that Barak and his wife stayed multiple times at Epstein's New York apartment between 2013 and 2017, even after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Even after the entire world knew what kind of man Jeffrey Epstein was, Barak kept visiting, and it gets deeper. Epstein claimed in his own messages that he was involved in Israeli politics. In 2019, Epstein told Steve Bannon that he was working to help Ehud Barak challenge Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israeli elections. He was trying to reshape the political landscape of Israel from the United States. Now, here is where it gets really sensitive. There are allegations, and these are allegations, not proven facts, that Jeffrey Epstein had connections to Israeli intelligence, to Mossad. An FBI memo, included in the released files, cites a confidential source who claimed Epstein worked with Israeli intelligence. The FBI treated this as a serious counterintelligence concern. It was documented, it was investigated. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has publicly asked, was Jeffrey Epstein working for Israel? And even Prime Minister Netanyahu himself. He shared an article on social media that raised questions about Epstein's ties to Israeli intelligence. His own people criticized him for it. And then there is the Modi connection, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Emails show that in 2017, Epstein was coordinating with Indian businessman Mukesh Ambani to arrange Modi's visit to Israel. After that visit happened, Epstein sent an email saying, and I quote his exact words, "The Indian Prime Minister took advice. It worked." So Epstein was not just connected to powerful men, he was allegedly influencing the foreign policy of entire nations. The question that no one in power wants to answer is, how much influence did Jeffrey Epstein really have, and who was he really working for? Now let's talk about the game, the real game that Jeffrey Epstein was playing. Jeffrey Epstein was not just a sex trafficker, he was a collector. He collected secrets. He collected compromising information on the most powerful people in the world, and he used that information as leverage, as a weapon. Think about what that means. If you have something that can destroy a president, a billionaire, a king, you have power, enormous power. And Epstein had that power for decades. The files show this pattern very clearly. Epstein allegedly blackmailed Bill Gates over personal secrets. He allegedly tried to influence Israeli elections through Ehud Barak. He was coordinating diplomatic visits between world leaders. He had connections to intelligence agencies. Now here is the question that some people in Washington are starting to ask, and it is a very dangerous question to ask. Was this release, this massive dump of 3 million pages, was this actually Trump's way of sending a message, a warning, to every powerful person in this country and around the world? Think about it. Trump signed the law. Trump's name is all over these files too. But Trump has already claimed the files clear him. And now every other powerful person on this planet is sweating, because their names are in there too, and more names could still come out. Remember, half the files are still hidden. This is the game. And right now, nobody knows who holds the most cards. Jeffrey Epstein is dead, but the network he built, the connections he made, the secrets he collected, none of that died with him. It is all in these files, and we are only beginning to understand what is really in them. Peter Mandelson, a senior UK official, has already resigned. The Clintons are facing contempt of Congress. Prince Andrew is being called to testify. Leaders from Norway, Australia, India, and Israel are all under scrutiny. This story is not over. This is episode 1. There is so much more to come. I will be back with more details as they come out. Subscribe to Daniel Brooks Reports. Share this video. Because the truth, the full truth, is something every single person deserves to know. This is Daniel Brooks.